From the ground to the grid, Africa has got the resources, but how do we thrive when we do not correctly leverage the vast resources at our disposal? Welcome to Blindspot Africa, the podcast where stakeholders come together to shape the future of Africa's energy and extractive resources. Listen to fresh insight and your dialogue on how inclusive resource governance can be beneficial for all Africans.
Hello, welcome to Blindspot Africa, a place where we shine the light on the issues too often overlooked and conversations about governance, accountability, and Africa's development journey. I'm Kodzo, and I'll be your host today. On today's episode, we are having an interesting conversation on green businesses and Africa's development. And we have just the right person to do that for us. Our guest today is my good friend Dennis. Dennis is a senior research associate at IMANI Africa, where he's been working on a lot of research and policy advocacy around climate, finance, green businesses, circular economy, and the broader political economy issues around resource extraction in Ghana and Africa. Welcome, ladies, to Blindspot Africa.
Thanks for having me.
So we are having today's conversation on work that you've been doing around green businesses and how that can contribute to climate action on the continent. I think it's one of the areas or the levers that is usually forgotten when we are having the climate action issue, especially just ended COP. We didn't hear much about how they use green businesses as a catalyst for, and even a general sense of how your work on green businesses to be in Ghana has been shaped past year.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think generally our work on green businesses started somewhere in 2020, where we sought to look at how do we drive or how do you put private sector at the heart of our climate resilience. So the overarching goal around stimulating Africa's green businesses is that if the benefits of climate investment can be translated to real economic gains and benefit, then it should be through how we are able to create opportunities or leverage on local market opportunities to use sustainable and environmentally sustainable means of transitioning or transforming local opportunities. Then we create some sort of value. That is how we are then able to transfer the benefits of our climate and energy transition to the ordinary citizen, also through job creation. So the whole idea about green businesses is that the way we do business is going to transition. But for us to then ensure that the benefits of our transition actually affects every aspect of our local level of development, then it should be led by our local businesses. It means that then the way they produce, the way they sell, the way they engage consumers and everything go through environmentally sustainable pathways. And through those solutions, they create jobs. They're able to exploit a lot more of the opportunities within our economy that, as you rightly mentioned, typically overlooked some of the green growth potentials that our economy has. So I think the raison d'etre of green business is that there are a lot of green growth potentials in our economies that normally gets overlooked. So green businesses tend to leverage on those opportunities to create jobs that are sustainable and also environmentally conscious. Together, we're able to create an economy that does not only exploit, but also adopt very sustainable pathways to growth. So that is the essence around green businesses, that is allowing local private sector to lead our climate transition. Yeah.
Let's do a little academic exercise. You have it. I mean, that is where we should have started from anyway. Green businesses, green growth. Can you help us understand what green businesses are and green growth and what the interconnection is between it?
Okay, so the linkages between green businesses and green growth is that, so the way we do business, our economies have been growing, but if you look at the growth patterns, have not been environmentally sustainable. So if you check Ghana's economic growth trends and our emission trends, you see that our emission trends have been increasing, or the greenhouse gas emission has been increasing as our economy also grows, which means that we are growing at an environmentally unsustainable pathway. And so the essence of green growth is that adopting a growth pattern that does not hurt the environment for future generation. And so every investment you make in the economy, beyond the growth that it delivers to the economy, it also protects the environment or leverages our natural resources in a more sustainable way for the future generation. And so in the economy, there are green growth opportunities that can be leveraged. So for example, if you pick, let's say, the waste management sector, if we currently the system that we have is the take, use, and dispose. But if you introduce the circular economy, then you are now creating more opportunities around what typically would have been take, use, and dispose to now to recycle. That then opens the economy to another side of business opportunities that hitherto did not exist. Now, when those opportunities are opened up, then they also add a lot more growth opportunities to the economy. So if you look at our natural resource wealth, how we able to pick our critical minerals, convert them into clean energy technologies, then to power our growth. And so there are a lot of opportunities within our environment that we don't take advantage of. And so the growth that we tend to record, it's more growth that is not environmentally sustainable. So the essence of green growth is that the economy is growing in a more environmentally sustainable pathway that would not hurt future generation. However, it leverages the current natural resources or resources available to now build a more sustainable path that creates sustainable jobs. It ensures inclusivity, and ensure that whatever we do, we are also concerned about sustainability in the long term. So the linkages is that every investment in the economy delivers both economic growth as well as environmental sustainability. So that is the essence of the green growth potentials. And so if you look at the work that green businesses do, we talk about green jobs. What it essentially is that the green growth potential in our economy is able to then create more sustainable jobs, not jobs that in the more, let's say, the linear economy, but in a more circular economy. These jobs are sustainable because what you do is that it runs in a cycle. You are able to sustain those opportunities, reuse those opportunities, and also take more advantage of the additional benefits that comes with adopting maybe a circular economy or investing into different areas that hitherto were not of interest. So trying to build our growth in a more environmentally sustainable pathway. That's sort of the linkages between the green growth and green business and green growth here.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. In my mind, in the mind of the ordinary business person, business people, their fidelity is to profits,
Yeah.
and maximizing shareholder value. So, what business do I have with thinking about environmental sustainability, especially where in my mind my business operations do not necessarily contribute to the pollution of the environment, for example? What is the incentive for me as a business to have that kind of orientation to doing business?
Well, so let me say that that sense of thinking emanates from the fact that we are depleting the natural resources that we have, and that our current consumption patterns are not sustainable to meet the present needs as well as the future needs. And so there should be a change in the way we produce and consume. And so you may think that your work does not hurt the environment in any way. However, the way that work you do, for example, the value chain you find yourself in, the way the goods and services are produced, if it is extractive and it is depleting the natural resources over a long period of time, what hitherto you could fall on may not be available. But the essence of the circular economy or thinking green is to look out for more sustainable pathways of sustaining those businesses that you are doing. So, for example, why would a market woman think about environmental sustainability, or why would we think about green business? The reason why it is important is that the effect of depleting our natural resources in an unsustainable manner affects every aspect of our life. So, for example, if you look at Africa, the reason why it is important for us to put green businesses or green growth at the heart of everything that we do is that resource depletion, it's accelerating very fast. And for that matter, it is likely to affect every other thing that we do, but more so affect the environment. And so, as our greenhouse gas emission is growing, what we need to do is that it affects our health. It has implication on food security. It has implications on job creation. It has implications on every facet of our life. So, for example, the effect of climate on health is that when there is flooding, it also opens the country up to a lot of health issues like malaria, cholera, and during the very heavy climate disasters, there are also a respiratory disease linked to climate change and all of that. So it has implication on your health. The other side too is that it has also implications on incomes, because what happens is that certain jobs that are affected, for example, people who are into the agricultural value chain, due to drought, and so the supply of raw materials may not be available to feed the industries, and so for that matter, it can affect the value chain, and so certain jobs could be lost. Another thing that we also see is that in terms of our ability to build, let's say, a sustained business over a long period of time, climate change is affecting every facet of our life. And so thinking green is about thinking, how do I continue doing what I'm doing but not hurt the environment? And so my work may not be related to maybe pollution or other things, but if I integrate sustainable pathways, one is that it helps reduce cost. These sustainable pathways helps you to reduce costs. Secondly, what it also does for you is that it also opens you to more opportunities, and you're able to build much more sustainable value chains. And so it may look as a remote concept to the ordinary person, but if you look at the very facet of our life, the basic aspect of our lives, you can see that climate affects every aspect of our life. And so your work may not be directly causing greenhouse gas emissions, but over time, because of resource depletion, then that also cause greenhouse gas emission, affect climate change, exacerbate. So then it has implication on your health, has implication of job creation, it has implication of even government spending. For example, the fiscal risk of climate disasters. We spend about 8 billion on the drought in the northern part of Ghana. That then affect government finances. Government have to then find money elsewhere to deal with that. And so climate is now a fiscal risk. So all of these factors make it necessary that we look at more sustainable business models. So now it's no more about business models that is just make profit, but models that think about sustainability. How do I sustain this in a more environmentally conscious way, but also creating sustainable businesses?
Right. I mean, you have worked with a number of businesses in Ghana and also through your work.
Yeah.
Which areas do you think hold the biggest potential,
Yeah.
or which sectors hold the biggest potential for such green businesses to thrive?
So in my experience working with the green business, I see that Africa has enormous green growth potential. But if you look at most of the sectors that have developed very rapidly, one would be the energy sector, that is solar, because of the renewable energy resources that we have. For example, if you come to Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot more solar irradiation, and so it creates a very good business also for the solar value chain. But even more so, the greater number of people without access to electricity is in Africa. So, and the most effective way of delivering electricity at a relatively cheaper cost is through renewable energy resources. And it's been proven to show that it's able to deliver energy that is clean and also relatively cheaper. Another area.
Some people argue that it's not reliable.
Well, as technology evolves, you see how battery technologies are evolving over time. Yes, the intermittency is there, but if you look at the cost of extending the grid to even unserved communities compared with construct of mini grid and rooftop solar and solar lanterns and others, the ease of delivering electricity with renewable energy is there. So because we have a lot more people without electricity in Africa, and these resources too are available, it's become a very, very, very strong business opportunity or potential for our economy. Another area too that you look at is also around agriculture in terms of climate smart agriculture. So we have a lot also. Majority of the let's say people who face food insecurity are in Africa, and those who face extreme hunger are also in Africa. And so in this in on the continent, there's also a huge opportunity for climate smart agriculture, not just because of the risk of climate change, but because of land tenure issues too is changing. And so we need to find innovative ways of producing more without degrading more land. And so there's also huge opportunity for climate smart agriculture that is able to deliver quality food to underserved people, or to feed like the food market in Africa. And so we have a great opportunity in climate smart agriculture. So then also in waste management, you see that in Africa, most of the municipal waste are really improperly managed.
Yeah.
And so that's also a huge recycling opportunity that's available also in Africa. And so I see a lot more opportunities within the energy sector in terms of solar. In some countries, a bit of opportunities around wind, then even on clean cooking solutions. So in Africa, we have a lot more of our population that do not have access to clean cooking solutions. And so that also creates business opportunities. That these solutions are not just solutions because there's a need, but they are transformative. So when people have access to electricity and they use them productively, then you are then transforming their ability, or you are transforming their livelihoods, because they have access to electricity. They can then have access to quality education services. Another point too is that they are also able to use electricity to leverage their local market opportunities, then to then create jobs. That is how you then build the local economies. Then that builds together to form like a district or metropolitan economy. Without electricity, there is no electricity is like the lifeblood of development. And so by extending electricity that is clean and green, that leverages on our available natural resources like the sun, then helps them to deliver relatively cheaper access to electricity for the underserved areas, which also means that challenges with education because of lack of access to electricity to deliver quality education to you then solve. And even in healthcare, delivering certain vaccines, code value chain, and all of that, all of these things are helping to transform local communities. So once electricity is extended, that is how you tend to then bridge some sort of the inequality gap. So they are more useful because they are at the heart of addressing our social inequalities. So for example, through climate smart agriculture, we're able to produce food sustainably. And through that, you deal with hunger, but you're also dealing with inequality. Then you are then addressing some of the very, very core developmental challenges, and also even waste management issues, opening up a lot more opportunities for our economy. So I see a lot of more opportunities within the energy, waste management, as well as the agricultural sector. These are the areas that hold potential.
It's interesting that you mentioned climate smart agriculture, because we've seen it in our various budgets and discussions around agricultural modernization. And the developing partners have actually put in a lot of money in this. Have the outcomes given you any sense that we are taking this green business, especially when it comes to climate smart agriculture, very serious?
Yeah, well, I think evidently, if you look at the green businesses that we've worked with over time, what you've observed is that in terms of the productivity output or the result, climate smart agriculture is delivering that. What it does is that we are able to now produce varieties that can withstand climate induced risk or climate risk. That is at the heart of climate smart agriculture, that the varieties that we are planting can resist the threat of climate change without affecting our yield. Then what then that means is that we are still able to meet our food needs, our yield, and also guarantee our income despite the changing climate. The other side of the issue too is that we're able to then sustain agro value chains that are very critical to our food industry and our food systems. Then the other benefits of climate smart agriculture too is that you are then able to, through some of these climate smart agri solutions, connect farmers who are very far away from the markets to the markets where their produce are needed and at the right specification, which also means that the farmer is getting timely climate information, then to determine when to plant, the disease risks that they are likely to face, and the solutions, able to get the right extension advice. And so then that translates to very good agricultural practices. Then their output is then higher. Another important thing is that the connections of value chains. And so through climate smart agri solutions, some of these agri-tech solutions are now able to then connect the farmers who hitherto could not produce certain specific quality that an industry in Tema may be looking for. But through some of these climate smart agri solutions, they are then able to know the type of variety and the type of quality that the market needs, produced to meet the market demand, and also make very, very, very significant income. And so we are seeing a lot more innovations coming in that area, and that gives that sector a lot more promise, that with very little land use, very, very small, let me not say small, but very little use of land, we're able to use innovative ways to increase yield and also make a higher income. But the most important thing is that we help our farmers still be able to survive despite the climate risk that they face. Yeah.
So far we are not wasting our money yet.
Oh, I wouldn't say so, because if you look at some of the green businesses that we engage, some of their solutions have actually delivered a lot more benefits to the farmers than before. So, for example, those who are receiving now climate information, rainfall information on their phones, hitherto wouldn't know even when to plant, what variety to even plant, which ways to even do the proper planting, what planting methods or planting varieties are climate resilient. All of these are now being developed through different climate let me say climate smart agri solutions. And so we have a very great opportunity that with the right policy incentives, we'll be able to sort of open that sector very well.
You're listening to Blindspot Africa. In this podcast, we delve deeper into critical issues of resource governance, including those that may not typically be highlighted in the media. We discuss the facts, figures, challenges, and pathways for Africa to achieve its full wealth potential. We also illuminate strategies on how citizens can demand accountability for resources managed on their behalf. Stay tuned for more insights.
Well, if you just join us, this is the Blindspot Africa. We've been talking green businesses and Africa's development with Senior Research Associate at IMANI, Dennis Asare. So we've been on a journey talking about green businesses, the nature of it, and all of that. What do you think are some of the levers that we can use to push, first of all, mainstream the idea as a climate action potential, and also push it for it to get a lot of scale up across the continent?
So I think that there are a lot of green businesses in Africa, but most of them tend to remain small because of the financing challenges, then also the kind of policy and business environment that they operate in. And so for me, I've always said that if you don't fix the governance problems, it will be very difficult for you to create a very robust market opportunity for them.
What are some of the governance?
So the governance problems that I see is that our policies are designed not really with green businesses in thinking. And so sometimes the way the policies are designed do not take cognizance of the very factors within our local context that can help these businesses grow, or how we can create the necessary business environment for them to scale up. So, for example, if you look at our climate change law, what is in our law that makes it, that creates or that make it compulsory for a business to start pursuing green products and services? Without that, you don't create a demand for green products and services. The essence of green policy is that you're able to use policy to create a demand for green products and services. Then green businesses have the technology and the tools to produce. Once they produce the green product and services, and there is a market for that, over time, then you build the investment environment that is supportive, so that they can now access financing because there's market. It means that there's guaranteed cash flow. That means that they can now access a lot more partnerships that can help them scale up. And also here in Africa, and even let's say in Ghana, green startups struggle a lot. Some of them have to rely on grant funding, donations, and others to build a bit credibility and build some cash flows before they get to a point where they can access some like debt financing and other forms of financing. And so, from the policy perspective, there should be a way where government use policy to create a need for green products and services. So, if you check some of the developed nations, the government started, for example, if you take Europe, their plastic policy and their plastic requirement and all of that, you can see a deliberate attempt to create value, to create demand for recycled products. If you look at in our scene, in our context, you don't see that deliberateness in creating demand for recycled products. If you take, let's say, solar, what sort of incentives are you building within your policy that make it relatively cheaper and competitive for people to then demand or need these green products and services? So
If you take plastic, for
Yeah.
example, in our areas, you see they'll be coming around for broken plastic chairs and bowls, and people exchange them for those bowls and they use them.
Yeah.
So the need is there. People
Yes.
are willing to use those things.
Yes, the role of policy is to create that environment that is conducive for the businesses to thrive. And you do that by using policy to create a need. So, for example, when Ghana passed the Renewable Energy Act Amendment in 2020, that says that high fossil fuel users must invest in some utility scale renewable energy project. Indirectly, because the renewable energy obligations are being strengthened, you then create a demand for those products and services. If you look at the emission trading systems in Europe, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, all of these are meant to create some sort of demand for green and environmentally sustainable business innovations. And so that is how you use policy to create sort of support for certain products and services, so that as they build the market, as they build much more a sizable market. And let me even emphasize that green businesses typically tend to have relatively small market. Over time, then they build very large market, build a credible cash flows, then they can access financing. So it starts with the policy intention to drive a particular narrative, or to drive that agenda of creating a conducive investment. And I think that in our assessment of our policy landscape, you can see that most of our policies were not designed with green businesses in thinking. A lot of the policies were designed with government still being a lead player on interventions, even though the private sector have the innovations and solutions to do that. And so a lot more of Africa's green businesses tend to struggle compared to if you take other parts of the developed worlds, where green businesses, even though there may be challenges, because of that policy consciousness or policy awareness, they are able to create certain demands for those green products and services. Then it creates business opportunities then to build sort of a sustainable business and market for the green enterprise. But here in our case, we've not done that. Typically, we go ahead to pass laws without testing from a policy perspective what are some of the market changes that have happened because of these policies. So I think that it's a matter of recognizing what exactly we want to do. So even though there's a higher political support for climate interventions, but from a practical policy perspective, we've not really decided what we want to do with green businesses in our economy. And so you find in our budgets, in our tax systems, we've not really considered the way their market operates and what sort of incentives can be aligned then to support them grow. So those are some of the, for me, they are some of the governance gaps that we are still not being able to fix. It's a policy problem. Green businesses struggle in Africa because we've not really decided what exactly we want to do with green businesses in the context of our climate action.
Okay.
Even though we recognize that their roles are important, but we've still not come to the point where we realize that this our climate political ambition. How do green businesses fit in there to help us achieve this ambition? How do I create the necessary investment environment then for them to thrive? Those are the things that we've not been able to fix. And so we have bits and pieces of everything happening, but they are not aligned and mutually coherent. And so you typically don't get the results. So those are some of the governance issues I think that we've not been able to establish very well. Then also we have the complexity of doing business in Ghana or in Africa. The challenge is that if you look at the business ready report, you see that it is difficult to register business in, let's say, Africa than in other developed worlds. Even business registration alone. Look at the bureaucratic process that people go through. And if you look at green businesses, who typically tend to have very relatively smaller market, face a lot more challenge in terms of even people's mindset around green product and services. It takes time for them to build a market. And so there is the need for policies that will then support them to scale. Part of that policy is that how then do I use my tax system to accelerate green businesses? How do I use government funding as seed grants to help these businesses to thrive? How do I create procurement opportunities for them in our public procurement framework? We've thought about green procurement, but to what extent have we conceptualized green SMEs in the context of our public procurement? What is the share of green purchases that must be done by an institution? All of those things have not been fixed. And so we talk more broadly about it, but we've not really taken deliberate steps to now decide this is the size of our green business market. These are the areas that they are stronger. These are the necessary policies that we must put in place so that they will thrive. It is when we have tested all of these, then we can then translate them into laws. Then it becomes binding. But if you don't fix all of these challenges, we've created a very complex system for them. Then also the market dynamics too, the cost of capital, the macroeconomic instability, exchange rate volatilities. Then you also have.
Now we have good exchange rate.
But I mean, if you look at our market, it's more, not really about how sharp the exchange rate will rise and fall, but it's how stable it is. Yes. So what the green businesses will require is a stable market where the inflation rate, exchange rate, in terms of tax rates are are all supportive. So there are a lot more market factors that really even interest rate, financing, is there available finance, and what is the share of commercial lending that is directed at sustainable businesses? Which aspect of the sustainable business is actually receiving this sort of lending? Do we understand the different? So there's a whole lot of things that we need to fix. That's the market and the governance issues that needs to be fixed, right? If we want to throw more attention on green businesses and if we want them to thrive. Yeah.
Okay. You are still watching the Blind Spot Africa. We are discussing green businesses and Africa's development, and we have with us today on this episode Senior Research Associate at IMANI Africa, helping us to understand what green businesses are, the green economy potential. We were just talking about some of the bottlenecks that green businesses face and how policy can be used to resolve those challenges for businesses to thrive and also become a central part of government's climate action. I mean, I am an inequality, is it advocate
Champion.
or champion? Yes. So you talked about green businesses, but when you started green businesses, green jobs. So I want us to transition the conversation to green jobs and the young people, women, and then marginalized communities, how we can get them ready in terms of the opportunities that are available within the green economy, and also opportunities in terms of direct business engagement, or in terms of employment, in terms of jobs. How is that shaping up? And what's the opportunities available for such kind of participation to happen?
So if you let's take it from how do we drive inclusivity through green businesses. So I mean, I think the first point when it comes to driving or addressing social inequality through green enterprises is one, to ensure that everybody has access to electricity, and even in the sense that in a more cleaner way, that is either clean cooking or electricity. Everybody has access to clean cooking solutions and electricity. What does is that also then opens up local market opportunities for people who are excluded, then to leverage access to electricity to take advantage of the opportunities within their communities. Then also look at how we can use green solutions to drive local industrialization. So, for example, if you take communities that are involved in, let's say, gari processing, how do we drive that using clean cooking solutions? If they are involved in, let's say, smoking fish, how do we ensure that they use sustainable fuels or fuels that are less harmful? And so through that, you are able to then create much more sustainable business for them, but also protect their dignity. Then also, when you drive local industrialization through green interventions or renewable energy interventions, what then happens is that you then create job creation opportunities at the local level, which means that young people then have job opportunities to do. Another great aspect is that green businesses can address some of our age old inequality issues like gender exclusion. What it does is that with the right interventions and policy and support, women can take advantage of the green opportunities within their communities, create sustainable jobs, and income. And you know that if you look at our poverty trend as a country, women led households tend to experience more poverty because women tend to invest their money into children's education, healthcare, and other things. And so I think that when we support women to then take advantage of clean energy or, let's say, green business opportunities within their localities, then we put them in charge of local industrialization. What that does is that it helps them to have secured access to income and minimize dependence on men. That creates that social inequality, gender abuse, and also a bit more exclusion of women from our local market opportunities. And so, for women in agriculture, if we support them with sustainable agricultural solutions, that's the climate smart agricultural solutions, it is a way of then securing their incomes, which means that once you secure their incomes, you then secure the livelihoods of the children in their households in terms of food security. You also secure, you give opportunity for them to also have a decent living. And for young people, I think the most important thing is creating sustainable and decent jobs that do not expose them to harmful environmental conditions or do not worsen their climate vulnerabilities, and also pay very decent wages. And that is what sustainable and green jobs seeks to do, that we're able to create sustainable jobs, which means that when green businesses thrive, then they create the green jobs. Then young people then can have the green jobs and decent income, and also work in sustainable jobs or industries that can then help grow their locality. So I think that at the very heart of green business, it's not just the environmental sustainability, but also the cost reduction, as well as its ability to open up a lot more opportunities, especially for excluded population. I think we can't transition. If anybody is left behind in the transition, then the transition has failed. The goal of the transition is that nobody is left behind. And how do we ensure that nobody is left behind? Which means that everybody should have access to electricity, everybody should have access to clean cooking solutions, and with electricity available, we support them to then take advantage of local market opportunities. Then we drive local industrialization through more sustainable pathways. They create that decent jobs and income that we will need to then address issues around social inequalities and the gender inequalities that we experience in the brown economy. Else, we are going to transport the drivers of inequality from the brown economy to the green economy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that has always been something on the mind of anybody that is talking about the just transition. That how do you ensure that wherever you are moving to doesn't create new inequalities or perpetuate
Yeah.
the existing inequalities that you have. So it's good that you've thrown some more light on that. In terms of young people, do you see that there is the appetite, right, to do this kind of things? And I'm asking this question also putting you in a difficult position where just suppose that to the young people currently engaged in illegal mining, for example, where they are making so much money, they are even doing TikTok videos, daring government come and close us down if you're there.
Yeah.
Right. And then we are talking about businesses, I mean, in a sustainable manner that protects the environment.
Yeah.
For such a young person, where is that appetite going to come from?
Well, let me also say that a bit of education and awareness creation is very, very important about the environmental risk or environmental threats that we face. For some of them, it is just the mere lack of awareness and understanding of the gravity of environmental threats that we face as a country. That is why they may find themselves in certain spaces. But I think by and large, with education and campaign, young people are realizing that the next generation belongs to us. And so the decisions that the decisions that go on about the future of our environment, they have to be at the center of it. And you can see locally and at COP, young people championing issues around environmental safety, environmental sustainability. And the beauty about young people is that young people tend to have the local knowledge. And so they understand their climate vulnerability, their climate vulnerabilities, their community climate vulnerability issues, and they understand also the kind of solutions that really can help address their community climate vulnerabilities. And so with education and technology, they're able to then develop innovations that address the climate vulnerability issues that we face. That is why if you see most green businesses are led by young people, because with education and the understanding of their community level or their country level climate vulnerability, they're able to then develop tailored solutions to deal with that, which is young people trying to take advantage or try to be at the center of this climate resilience and our transition to a green economy. What then that happens is that young people are not playing a peripheral role, but they are at the core of whatever is happening. So within the policy landscape, you see a lot more youth-led advocacy group. Our very friends from the Strategic Youth Network for Development, other groups, and Gaio. These are youth-led civil society groups that are trying to mobilize young people's interest in environmental sustainability issues. And sometimes they do it through awareness campaigns and education and training, capacity building for civil society and individuals. What this is doing is that we are building a group, or let's say a community of young people who are not only concerned about development, but they're also concerned about the kind of environment that accompanies our development. So I think at every point in time, you see young people taking advantage of their understanding of the local problem, their education and the technology that they know, trying to then bridge that gap to solve the problem. So some of the green businesses that we work with are using coconut waste then to produce fertilizer. Some are using coconut waste to produce charcoal briquettes. Some are also creating very, very, very interesting farmhouses. Some are also doing even climate smart poultry farming. There are also instances where we have women and young people leading clean cooking solutions. And I think at the last time we had a conversation around the new ASAP book on environmental sustainability and climate policy. You saw some of the conversation around even ethanol, the clean cooking conversation we had at the University of Ghana. And you see, all of these young people are at the heart of it. And so, by and large, we recognize the times that we are in, that we don't only need development, but we need development that is sustainable. So we are built, at least gradually, we are building a community of young people who are willing to lead. And I think that this conversation also forms part of the advocacy that young people are making, that there's a need for us to start rethinking the way we develop, the way we produce, the way we consume, and pursue more sustainable pathways. And so I think with more education and government's commitment to then also support some of these innovations, the young people who may not feel, or who feel that these conversations are so remote, and sometimes indeed they are so remote. For example, someone who is in a village somewhere that has no light, when you talk about environmental sustainability, they are thinking about food and survival first. But if you're able to then connect that the food security issue that they face has something to do with even the environment, and so planting trees, trying to engage in more environmentally sustainable farming practices can then address all of that. Then it brings some sort of understanding to that. So that's why young people are interested. Young people are key to this conversation. I think that we can't do this conversation without young people. Yeah.
Very interesting thoughts that you shared with us. So, I mean, in wrapping up, if you look ahead, what gives you hope that you and I will not be having this conversation at this scale where we are talking about how green businesses have not been at the focus of climate action in 10 years?
What gives me a lot of hope is that despite all the challenges in the market, we see green businesses doing very well, and across different sectors. And one of the things I see going into the future is that there's going to be a great market for green products and services going into the future as we build a lot more climate conscious population. So, for example, now the threat of flooding, it's making people more conscious about their waste management practices. People are now patronizing recycled products. There is more attention towards circular economy in terms of reuse, sharing platforms, and also solutions that tend to sustain material over a long period of time. That sense of consciousness means that a market is coming that is interested, it will grow. There's that potential. And also, the very threat of climate change to every aspect of our life is building this whole climate consciousness across every aspect of our life. And I think that green business in Africa are at a very right time. Let me say, if there's a word like that, they have come at such a time as this. That is the very right time, because Africa is still unlocking a lot of its natural resource wealth. And green technologies, green solutions are the pathways where we can create the sustainable local industrialization, where we convert these natural resources into clean products and services, or let me say clean technologies, that then addresses a lot of our developmental issues in a more sustainable manner. So we are going to see a lot more investment and focus on climate smart agriculture, because food insecurity is worsening, and so it could create that much attention for that. In terms of extending electricity to about 600 million people in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa who don't have access to electricity, it's a huge business market that is coming up also for those in the clean energy space. In terms of waste management and recycling, and the whole circular economy is going to open up the economy to industrialization opportunities. For example, if you look at plastic recycling policies that are coming up, there's going to be a time where we have extended producer responsibility, and that then opens the economy to a whole new plastic recycling business opportunities. Then if you look at even nature-based solutions, how all of that are contributing to address our climate vulnerability. So I think the opportunities are still coming. We are still at a very young age of our climate resilience, even though the vulnerabilities are there. In terms of the opportunities, we are still at a very, very early days and we are building. And most green businesses in Africa are still at their early stage. They are yet to get to the growth stage or the maturity stage. They are still within the early stages. And so with the right policy and with the right incentives, we will create the necessary investment environment that will then support them to scale their innovations. And that is how we will create a more sustainable market for green solutions that we have in Africa. Yeah.
Well, Dennis, thank you very
Thanks for
much
having me.
for
It's a
honoring
pleasure.
the invitation to be on Blindspot Africa.
It's a pleasure.
This has been Blindspot Africa. We've been discussing green businesses and Africa's development with Dennis Asare, who is a policy guru with special focus on climate change, climate finance, green businesses, circular economy, and everything climate action, mitigation, adaptation, everywhere. He's there. He's been helping us to understand green businesses in Africa. So, like you've seen, Blindspot Africa is your platform to engage with the questions that matter for Africa's resource future. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Blindspot Africa wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss any episode. Until then, I'm Kodzo Yauche, and this is Blindspot Africa. Let's step into the blind spot together.
Thank you for joining us on Blindspot Africa, your platform for insightful discussions on promoting inclusive resource governance across the continent. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave your feedback or reviews. Stay tuned for our next episode.